Under the global political and economic changes, China's challenges and response strategies are highly anticipated. The century's grand reconciliation, the illusion of economic prosperity, and rapidly accumulating risks. Zweig once said in his book, The World of Yesterday, that every major change in history begins with imperceptible details. And in the torrent of world history, we are merely bubbles in the waves, drifting with the current. The world is at a historical turning point, a pivotal moment of change not seen in a century. On the surface, the global economy still maintains a semblance of prosperity, and everyone is enjoying it. However, this irrational prosperity is like a mirage on sand dunes, with unfathomable crises buried beneath the glitz. The market value of the 7 major tech giants in the U.S. stock market soared, dominating the market, and once accounting for 28% of the total market value of the U.S. stock market. The capital market, fueled by narratives of data and technology, is heading towards unprecedented frenzy. But all of this is essentially the aftermath of monetary easing. Is the global capital's advanced consumption in the tech sector. The vicious cycle of high valuations, high leverage, and high debt has led the entire high-tech industry into a bubble stage. And the tightening of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy is undoubtedly the final blow to this capital feast. The country also could not remain unaffected. The prices of equity assets are experiencing severe fluctuations, and local debts are continuously rising. The deleveraging in the real estate market has led to credit tightening, putting immense pressure on the financial markets. The deeper issue lies in the fact that the benefits of globalization have not reached everyone, with wealth accumulation remaining more on the capital side rather than in the hands of workers. Both China and the United States are simultaneously facing significant debt crises and the risk of unequal distribution. And all of this points to the same fundamental issue. The misallocation of the dividends of the globalization era has made social imbalance a global challenge. Meanwhile, the retreat of globalization has become irreversible. Supply chains are being restructured, global industrialization is balancing as trade barriers re-emerge, and the trend of de-risking in the industrial chain is intensifying. Beneath the surface of clamor and prosperity, cracks and imbalances are hidden. The old world order is disintegrating, and a new order has yet to take shape. In this unprecedented change not seen in a century, China and countries around the world are facing increasingly severe external challenges. The instability of global markets has become the new normal, and the development of the world economy is entering a deep water zone with undercurrents surging. The shifts in the global economic landscape, the rise of trade protectionism, the restructuring of supply chains, and the rebalancing of industrialization, along with the dilemma of dollar hegemony and the resurgence of isolationism. Since the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, the United States has relied on the monetary advantage granted by the Mundell-Fleming trilemma. Leveraging the status of the dollar as the global reserve currency, it balances between free capital flow, independent monetary policy, and exchange rate stability. It has achieved a relatively unique balance. However, behind this advantage lies the Triffin dilemma. To maintain the global liquidity of the dollar, the United States must sustain a trade deficit, which inevitably leads to industrial hollowing and social distribution imbalances. In the past, this was offset by the globalization dividends of American multinational corporations and the substantial financial profits of Wall Street. The logic of China producing and the United States consuming, China saving and the United States consuming, could operate smoothly. But today, all of this has fundamentally changed, and neither the globalization dividends nor Wall Street can inject more energy into America's super machine. Moreover, the social division caused by unequal distribution has completely changed the rules of the game. Some jokingly say that the United States is a country without the risk of foreign invasion, but with the risk of another civil war between the North and South. This shows that the social divide is quite significant. The trade deficit means that capital must continuously flow into the U.S. financial market, while the manufacturing sector continues to decline. This results in the loss of domestic job opportunities in the U.S., and the social structure begins to tear apart. Facing this predicament, the United States monetary policy and trade policy have created a natural prisoner's dilemma, continuing to maintain the benefits of globalization and the hegemonic status of the dollar. This means that domestic wealth distribution becomes further imbalanced, while choosing protectionism implies the fragmentation of the global economic order and the return of conservatism in American society. Even as the international order becomes unbalanced, due to the world losing a stabilizing force, the level of unpredictability in the future world of the United States might exceed our imagination. After all, an era of highly coupled global political and economic systems, and an era of global governance vacuum has never existed in human history. In this dilemma, the direction of U.S. policy is under close scrutiny. The series of actions taken by the Trump administration has elevated this contradiction to new heights. The Trump administration chose the path of 1930s isolationism under the banner of making America great again, and introduced a series of trade protection policies. From tariffs on China to technology blockades, from supply chain adjustments to the decoupling of trade, technology, and finance, the essence is to cater to domestic political agendas. It aims to appease the middle and low-income groups marginalized by globalization. This approach is not an isolated case. The US, Germany, France, Japan, and even we are facing the same issue. The imbalance of globalization's dividends is driving political agendas. Populism has become the political remedy used by politicians in various countries to address the inequities in distribution. Piketty, in his book Capital in the 21st Century, revealed this structural contradiction brought about by globalization. The wealth has not benefited everyone, but is highly concentrated among a small group at the top. Meanwhile, the lower classes have been gradually marginalized as the wealth gap widens. Global income inequality has continued to worsen over the past 40 years. The income share of the top 10% wealthy class has gradually increased, while the income share of the bottom 50% of the population has continuously declined. This trend clearly reveals the imbalance in global economic development. Trade protectionism implemented by countries like the United States is essentially a politicized response. By creating external competitors to shift the focus from domestic conflicts. However, this strategy does not truly solve the problem. The establishment of trade barriers, on the contrary, has accelerated the restructuring of global industrial chains, leading the global supply chain into a de-risking phase. China, as a key node in the global industrial chain, is facing a decline in exports. A series of challenges, such as the withdrawal of foreign capital and rising employment pressure. Historical lessons from the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act and the Showa crisis provide insights into the isolationism prevalent in the United States during the 1920s to 1930s. With the outbreak of the economic crisis from 1929 to 1933, the United States enacted the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act to build high trade protection barriers, leading the world into a tariff war. Trade protectionism essentially ended the normal international trade order. Under the impact of the global economic crisis, Japan fell into the Showa panic. With a deteriorating international trade environment, insufficient domestic demand, and a fragile financial system. This caused the Japanese economy to fall into a deep recession. Ultimately, under the pressure of domestic social discontent and political extremism, Japan chose the extreme path of external expansion, attempting to resolve its economic difficulties through war. Today's China, although its national power, system, and economic structure differ from Japan's at that time. Economic difficulties are often not just economic issues. They can further affect social psychology and political stability. They may even trigger deeper systemic adjustments. In the face of global economic changes, China needs to learn lessons from history. It should avoid moving towards extreme confrontation and ensure the stability of its internal social structure and the continuous advancement of reforms. The strategic choices guiding China and the world should focus on breakthroughs in core technologies and industrial upgrades. In the context of global supply chain adjustments, China must accelerate the independent research and development of core technologies, reduce reliance on external markets, and especially promote domestic alternatives in key areas such as semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and new energy. Ensure the security of the industrial chain, deepen the domestic demand market, and upgrade consumption. Optimize income distribution through initial distribution and redistribution. Vigorously implement fiscal expansion policies and fully enhance social welfare. promote the transition from a production-oriented society to a consumption-oriented society, and establish a long-term stable mechanism for domestic demand growth. The core approach is to continuously promote the National Income Doubling Plan, directly providing financial subsidies to improve people's livelihoods. Thoroughly repair the balance sheets of residents and small and micro enterprises, while resolutely eliminating zombie enterprises and restructuring debts. Make every effort to support individual businesses and small and micro enterprises. Reduce taxes and share profits to benefit people's livelihoods, allowing citizens to have extra money in their hands and warmth in their hearts so their resolve can be firm. It is necessary to firmly post notices of reassurance in the hearts of residents, completely changing expectations, to make the social atmosphere positive, healthy, and upward. Optimize the financial system and reform the capital market. Strengthen financial supervision and prevent capital market bubbles. Optimize the debt structure to enhance the stability of the financial system, while promoting the internationalization of the renminbi, especially ensuring Hong Kong's role as an international financial center and a superconnector, and weakening the influence of ideology on Hong Kong. Return Hong Kong to the ranks of international financial centers, allowing common law to be the main force for China's financial opening and the internationalization of the renminbi, gradually reducing reliance on the US dollar system. While enhancing flexibility, also increase financial independence. Adjust the geoeconomic strategy to expand cooperation with emerging markets in Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Latin America, and Africa. Build a diversified international economic network to reduce dependence on European and American markets. However, it must be fully recognized. In terms of purchasing power, market demand, and total volume, the markets of Europe, the United States, and Japan are still the largest in the world, and the most dynamic markets. Not only should they not be abandoned, but there is also a need to be humble, get involved, and focus on deep cultivation. How can we break out of the historical cycle of the rise and fall of great powers? Discussing that the world is currently undergoing unprecedented changes not seen in a century. The old economic order is disintegrating and the new structure has not yet fully formed. However, by viewing conflicts and struggles from the perspective of a community with a shared future for mankind, we can find the greatest common ground for cooperation. President Trump said at the beginning of his term that the two great powers, China and the United States, are fully capable of solving the vast majority of the world's problems. Carrying the vision of a four-eyed world requires China and the United States to collaborate and jointly devise a plan for a great reconciliation of the century. For instance, both parties should care for and respect each other's core interests and achieve relative military consensus. The U.S. acknowledges that there is only one China in the world, and Taiwan is indeed a part of China. On this basis, the U.S. restrains Taiwan from pursuing legal independence through a public referendum or any form of substantial independence actions, and all three parties work together to promote the peaceful resolution of the Taiwan Strait issue. Meanwhile, China addresses the Russia-Ukraine issue and the South China Sea issue. On the Korean Peninsula issue, the Iran issue, the Israeli-Palestinian relations, and the Middle East and Myanmar issues, China coordinates its stance with the U.S. and sets aside disputes. Promote a major easing and reconciliation in the global geopolitical landscape. This is by no means appeasement or compromise, but a pragmatic choice based on the strength of both parties. After all, cooperation between China and the U.S. benefits both, while conflict harms both. China-U.S. cooperation indeed has the capability and strength to solve the vast majority of today's world problems. The result of both sides going their own way and refusing to yield over the past 5 years is something no one wants to see and the world cannot accept. A major easing and reconciliation is imperative. Of course, China is committed to the international trade order. In terms of trade and economy, adjustments must be made to achieve balance. We can no longer engage in the past practices of overcapacity dumping competition and non-tariff barrier trade subsidy measures. In the post-WTO era, it will certainly be a time of mutually beneficial trade systems based on trade balance, an era of free trade, and even more so, an era of a fair trade environment. In these aspects, both parties need to coordinate their positions and seek common ground while reserving differences. The important thing is that both sides must align their words with their actions and uphold integrity. If China and the United States truly stand at the height of a community with a shared future for mankind, they should focus on cooperation rather than conflict, peace rather than war, and development rather than decline. Then, this century's grand reconciliation plan, led by China and the United States, can certainly be realized. This is the true welfare of humanity and the good news for the world. Zweig said that every era believes itself to be modern, and every light thinks itself to be bright, although the trajectory of history is worth learning from. However, the future's destiny is still in our own hands. In the face of the global political and economic cycles, China must proactively seek change to remain invincible in future competition. Reform and opening up remain the optimal solution for China to break through its dilemmas. True strength lies not in defense, but in reshaping the rules. Amid the tides of the times, as long as we believe, when the morning star of civilization can illuminate the sky of the human spirit, human cognition will no longer be merely quantum entanglement, nor the binary choice between the ancient Eastern harmony in diversity and the Western cowboy pioneering spirit. Standing at the crossroads of the human world, this great reconciliation of the century terrifies the beacon in the river of civilization, indicating that when artificial intelligence begins to decipher the semantic code of the Tao Te Ching, when blockchain technology recreates the mutual trust of ancient trade caravans, humanity is seeking new ways of observation and communication in the quantum superposition state of civilization. Reconciliation is not the end of history, but the initiation program for the upgrade of civilization. In this program, the bright moon over the corner tower of Beijing still illuminates the tides of the Gulf of Mexico, while digital thinking is transforming camel bell paintings into a torrent of bits, continuing to write the eternal narrative of the meeting of Eastern and Western civilizations.